Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN, presented by Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you. It's going to be a great show here today. We got a couple great guests, a lot to get to. I don't really want to waste too much time off the top. Those hanging out live on our FTN YouTube page, we appreciate you. If you guys can smash the like button, as my buddy Pat Mayo loves to say, and you have any comments, any questions, please leave them there. We'd love to incorporate you guys on this show as well. But if you're watching the replay over at our FTN YouTube page or ftnbets.com, ftnfantasy.com, you have any questions at any time, you can always reach out at Chris Meaney on the Twitter machine. DMs are open. Slide on in. Or you can leave a question there in the YouTube section. I'll always circle back before a puck drop, tip-off, and kickoff in the NFL. We're just a couple days away, 2 sleeps away from the Super Bowl. We're going to talk a lot of Super Bowl here. We've been talking about it, of course, for 2 weeks, but we got Gilles Gallant who's going to stop by. We're going to talk a couple touchdown props. Going to just tease his show, Touchdown Town, big game edition happening Sunday at 1 Eastern. He's got several touchdown props for you in that show, but we're going to get a sneak peek of what he's thinking for the game, maybe share one of his favorite touchdown props. And also today we have the big game super show happening at 2:30 Eastern. I'm jacked for this. I could hardly sleep. I was up all night last night, honestly, just prepping for this show and just excitement. You know, Jeff Ratcliffe and I are going to co-host this together. We're going to have Benny Ricciardi come in for his best bets. We're going to have Matthew Friedman hop in for, some sides and some totals and get a feel what he's thinking for this game. We're going to have, of course, Gilles Gallant pop in for some touchdown props. I have some props, some same-game parlays. Jeff Ratcliffe has some props, and we're going to have some rapid-fire props towards the end of the show as well. So a lot of action over at FTN, our YouTube page. The guys killed it last night, by the way, the NBA trade deadline show. Zach Gallen, Fast Eddie Fear, and Adam Pfeiffer. You can go back and watch that on our FTN YouTube page as well. We got Frank Brank in here today. I call him Frank Bank. I mean, the guy's just winning money all the time. He's our NBA expert, also knows a thing or two about the NFL. But I want to just kind of recap the trade deadline from yesterday with him. Of course, how it always works. Those hanging out here, you guys, if you've ever done any shows, and there's a lot of people that have hung out here on our show that have done shows. I'm not trying to, say that nobody, people watching don't do shows. What I'm trying to say is how many times, and the people in the control room in Toronto Anthem Sports Entertainment, they know this as well. How many times when you wrap up a show, something big, significant happens? All we talked about for the past couple of days was James Harden. Was he going to get traded? Alex Booker came on. Is it going to happen? Is Simmons going to get dealt? Is it going to happen? And then the second we finished the show, it happened. The trade went down. James Harden shipped to Philadelphia for a whole lot going the other way to Brooklyn, including 2 first-round picks, Drummond, Seth Curry, and of course, Ben Simmons. So I want to get Frank's thoughts on that trade, a couple other trades, as well as some NBA futures. Now that, the trades have happened, who does he like? The Brooklyn Nets are favored, according to DraftKings, to win the NBA championship. They've lost 10 straight games. They have a tough schedule ahead. Don't know when Simmons is going to be ready. Is Kyrie going to be playing a lot of games down the stretch? I know the mandate could change where we could see him every day, but man, a lot of moving pieces right now in Brooklyn. I do think the Nets won that trade. I think they're the better team today than yesterday. And I'm not really buying into James Harden and the 76ers, but we'll ask the expert Frank what he has to say when it comes to that, and we'll talk about a couple futures as well. Like I said, a lot to get to on this show, a handful of games on the ice, so I got a couple NHL picks and props for you as well, but I want to recap last night's action in the NHL and in the NBA. Let's start in the NHL, the 3 stars from last night, and Jacob Markstrom is on here again. Why not? Back-to-back nights he played. He had the shutout against the Vegas Golden Knights. We talked about jumping in early. And I say early, there's a couple months left here in the season, but getting in now before the odds change for him to win the Vezina. We gave 22-1 on this show yesterday. He's now 18-1 to win the Vezina and 14-1 for those who are north of the border that have Bet365. 42 saves yesterday against the Maple Leafs. He was phenomenal. Mitch Marner had 10 shots. Matthews had 8 shots. They just peppered Jacob Markstrom. And yet again, the guy just had a phenomenal showing. So now he's got a 2.13 goals against average. It's the 3rd best mark in the NHL among goalies with 1,000 minutes. We're not including Husso, who should have started yesterday, by the way. Jordan Binnington, thank you for that. A .927 save percentage for Markstrom, also 3rd best. And of course, he's got the 8 shutouts. And the way the Flames are playing hockey, and as stingy as they are, I know they gave up a lot of rubber yesterday, but it was the second half of a back-to-back. And they played two really good teams in those back-to-back games, the Golden Knights and the Maple Leafs. Just the way that the Flames play, they really are a stingy team. They're cooking on offense. They can score goals with the best of them. They got one of the better top lines in the league in Lindholm and Gaudreau and Tkachuk. We could see a couple more shutouts here from Markstrom down the stretch. He's got 3 over his last few games. A little bit of love there to Nico Hischier, the former Halifax Moosehead. 2 goals and 3 points for Nico. He's got goals in 3 straight games, 4 goals and 5 points over that span, filling in for Jack Hughes on the top line. He's looked pretty good. And then had to give some love here to Joe Snively, of course, of the Washington Capitals. If you guys checked Dangle Bet Selly yesterday with myself and Eric Young, you would have seen that Joe Snively was an anytime goal scorer for Eric Young, plus 500 to score a goal, and he scored 2. He had 3 points and 3 shots, and nobody had more than 3 points yesterday, so a pretty good showing from Snively. We had him in the FTN Daily article, the NHL Core article. I had him in there as a nice little value play at 2.5, and I saw some green screens of people hitting the anytime goal at plus 500, and I think I saw somebody hit first goal, which paid out pretty nicely as well. So a shout out there to Eric Young as a 3 stars of the night. Of course, the Habs lost last night by more than 2 goals, which is something that has happened basically all year. But I did see some improvements, right? I thought Cole Caulfield played one of his better games of the year. He scored a goal. He actually had 2. One was called back from an offside. But I wanted the coaching change. Like to see it. Maybe St. Louis can strap on the pads. They clearly need a goalie, but I saw some positive things yesterday. Don't worry, the losses are still going to come, Habs Nation. You're still going to have a top pick no matter what they do. But I do think they should try to acquire a veteran goalie for the cheap, like the 6th-round pick or just something. I know it seems silly, but just keep the puck out of your net, right? So you can still develop some of these younger kids. Let's turn our attention over to the NBA. Had 3 stars here from last night, led by Luka Doncic. Man, dude must have been so jacked to see Kristaps get traded. That was a weird trade, too, by the way. We'll get into that maybe with Frank. But how about Luka's performance last night? A career-high 51 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, 7 threes. Those 7 threes he hit in the first quarter. He had 28 points. He was 7 for 9 from 3 in the first quarter. He shot 84%. He was 1 point shy of breaking the Mavericks franchise record for the most points in a quarter, held by, of course, Disco Dirk Nowitzki, who had 30 back in the day, or 29 back in the day, rather. But for Luka, the first Mav to ever go 55-5. He was phenomenal last night. Dallas has won 4 straight, 1.5 games back of Utah. Nobody talking about them. Why would they? Trent Jr., we've been talking about quite a bit. This guy has been an absolute baller. He's a top 25 fantasy basketball player, according to Yahoo, if you use the average way of things in the scoring, but 42 points, 6 threes. He had 5 steals. It's his 2nd straight game. He has had 5 steals, 15 for 26 from the floor, and 6 for 14 from beyond the arc. That's why we've been giving the over on his threes and his points on this show, as he just jacks up so many shots from beyond the arc. His last 30 days, he's averaging 25 points, 4.7 threes, 2.2 steals. That is the 7th best player in fantasy basketball over the last 30 days. And then CP3 like fine wine, baby. 19 dimes last night for the 2nd time in his last 7 games. His 29th double-double. He leads the NBA in assists per game, 10.6. Phoenix rolled over Milwaukee last night, 131-107. Phoenix has won 4 straight games, and they've beaten some good teams over that span in Philly, in Chicago. They're 45-10, a league best. They've won 9 of 10 in 18 of their past 20 games. We're going to break, and we're going to bring in Gilles Gallant. We are going to get into the Super Bowl. We'll ask him a couple touchdown props as well. Don't go anywhere. Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. Keep her locked. Whoa! Somebody is ready for the Super Bowl, Mr. Gilles Gallant, G-Dog 5000, touchdown town, the big game edition happening Sunday at 1 Eastern over at our FTN YouTube page. Those hanging out on Game Plus Network need to head on over to our FTN YouTube page and subscribe, set the reminder for that show. Dude, you are looking very, very sharp. What's up?
Thank you, sir. Yes, not only am I going to give out some touchdown picks, I've got a court date after this. Might intend a funeral maybe right after it. You know, if I got the suit jacket on, I might as well go do those things. Obviously in a smaller group, maybe masked up just because of COVID.
Right. Well, I hope you're not attending a funeral. You are also going to join us a little bit later on today for our big game super show happening at 2:30 Eastern time. You're going to stop in with a couple touchdown props. We don't want to take too much away from that show and your show as well, but we do want to pick your brain just a little bit. Of course, it would be really weird not to have you on this week, considering you've been on every single week, sharing some touchdowns throughout the season. So we do appreciate you, dude. Let's just talk about the game overall. We've seen some line movement. We've saw 4, 4.5, 3.5, now kind of back to 4, total at 50.5, jumped down to 48.5. I don't know if we see it climb to 49.5 or 50. I think it could trend that direction. But what do you think overall of this matchup, this game? How do you think things will play out?
Yeah, I think Meaney, I think we've talked about now. I mean, here we are now, like 10 days in of just kind of hammering down, it seems like, every angle in this game. And I don't think many people can really make a case about how the Bengals are better than the Rams, at least what I would consider a legitimate betting case, other than the fact that they're going to say that Joe Burrow is awesome. And I can't really disagree with that. So for me, from a side and total standpoint, this is kind of the two angles that I've taken with it. I'm going to take Rams -3 first half. I got that at even money. And the reason why I'm taking Rams -3 is just how they come out of the gate. They really start off fast in games. They led by double digits in 2 of the 3 playoff games. That home crowd atmosphere, I think that could give them a pretty early push. And the Bengals offense, they start slow. The last 2 games versus the Titans and the Chiefs, 19 points total in both of those first halves. And I just don't really trust LA full game to feel good about betting them at 4, 4.5 from a full game spread. Because, I mean, even just like the second half against that Bucks team, they were up by like 15 to 20 points, and it was just a second half implosion by them, like 2 turnovers. And then they were up big, like, for example, on the 49ers in week 18, they blew it. They almost lost to Huntley and the Ravens in week 17. Like it's right. There's some track record here. It's not just the playoffs, like over the last 5 to 6 games where they come off fast, and then in the second half, they just start to kind of just look very ordinary. So for me, I like a 17-7 lead at halftime. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now for the Rams. So that's why I'm going to take the Rams -3 on a first half, just because I can't feel good about taking a full game spread when you got Joe Burrow on the other side.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, they started off really slow, and they've kind of orchestrated comebacks over the past few weeks. I don't think they can afford to start slow, man. Like the way that the pass rush is with LA, no way. And I heard Burrow say it. They're going to want to start fast because if they get behind by a couple scores, which you, I mean, just alluded to, if you think that's going to, I mean, just anybody, if they think that's the way it's going to be in the first half, you're going to just have Rams pass rushers just teeing off on Joe Burrow and bringing the heat, which they probably will anyways. You have a lean on the total. It kind of feels like maybe the under is what.
Well, the lean for me. So here's the deal. Here's how I would tell you to play the total. If you think that the game is going to go over 48.5, I think you should just take Bengals money line instead, because I think that the Rams are going to put up like right now, the team total for the Rams is at 27.5. I think they're putting up at least 24 points in this game. So if you think the Bengals are going to win, they're going to have to score at least 24 themselves. So that would take you over the 48.5. So for me, the way I look at it is like, if you're just really high on the over on this, I think you're probably thinking that the Bengals are going to keep it close. Cause I don't think that we're going to see this kind of runaway game where, the Rams put up 40 points by themselves and then the Bengals have 10 to 15 points. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I mean, for me, I kind of position myself. I think it's probably going to be like a 28 to 24 game, maybe a 25 to 21 game. So maybe the Rams do end up covering. I just don't trust the Rams to do that. But I think if you think the Bengals are going to keep it close, you might as well just pair the over with it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good strategy. Okay, let's get into some touchdowns. We want to save some for your show, but
Sure.
give me your best one. Give us the
All
best
right.
one.
I think you and I are both on the same page on this one, man. We both love OBJ to get a touchdown in this game. Odell Beckham, I was able to grab him at plus 150. He's around plus 140 at BetMGM. I'd still bet it at those odds. And for me, he offers the best value just based on odds and circumstance. So he scored 6 touchdowns in 11 games since joining the Rams. And I think there's a variety of ways that he could score. But the one thing that actually shocks you when you look at those touchdowns that he scored, they're all like mostly from the goal line. 5 of those 6 touchdowns were scored within the 10-yard line. And that's kind of like Mike Evans, Devontae Adams kind of territory for me. Like when I think of like goal line kind of pass catchers, like from a wide receiver standpoint. And if he can't score at the goal line, I think the Rams could still find him, and Matthew Stafford could still find him on a deep pass. I mean, FTN data shared that stat this morning about Matthew Stafford's passer rating when it's deep passes. It's 134.5 for a passer rating compared to 91.5 in the regular season. So, and then as well, during the regular season, the Bengals were bottom 5 in passing plays of 20-plus yards or more and bottom 10 in passing plays of 40 yards or more. So for me, I just think Odell Beckham, there's just a variety of ways that he could score. And when you kind of look at the rest of the Rams options, like I'm not betting Cooper Kupp at minus 160. I don't know if Tyler Higbee's going to play. I'm not really sure if I really trust Kendall Blanton yet. Jefferson's kind of faded into the background, and Ben Skowronek has got like hands like a frying pan, man. Like he just can't catch the ball. So I'm going to trust Odell Beckham in this spot the most at plus 150.
Yeah, I got a bunch of stats in the next block here for OBJ, and I know you probably know a lot of this as well, but I mean, since we're on him, we might as well just kind of discuss him a little bit more. I mean, it's been a different regular season OBJ from playoff
It's New York Giants OBJ now, man. It's New York Giants OBJ.
For sure. I mean, in the regular season, he had a reception percentage of 56%. He was averaging 38 receiving yards per game and 2 first downs per game. Here in the playoffs, an 83% catch rate. It's the highest by a wide receiver over the last 10 postseasons with a minimum of 20 targets. He's averaging 78.7 receiving yards per game and 4.3 first downs per game. And you just gave some great numbers on the usage inside the red zone. I mean, he's looking like elite OBJ, right? From, like you said, the New York Giant OBJ. And I would imagine the Bengals are going to double Cooper Kupp, have some safety help there.
You would think.
You would think
a defense by now would be like, you know what? Maybe we want to defend Cooper Kupp, especially with the fact that, like, I looked this up this year, just like looking at Kupp's receiving yards. When he gets held under 100 yards, the Rams are 2-3 this year. So maybe you want to double Cooper Kupp? I mean, I know it's easier said than done. Yeah. Just an obvious, but I feel like a defense just hasn't really took the initiative and stand to say, you're beating us, Van Jefferson. You're beating us, Tyler Higbee or Kendall Blanton in this instance. Cooper Kupp is not beating us. I'm still waiting for a team to decide to do that from a defensive game plan standpoint.
Yeah, it's been a little crazy. I mean, even some of these playoff games, right, with the Bucs just kind of forgetting about him, and then San Fran towards the end of the game too. It's like, what the heck? But another thing with OBJ, so if they are going to double and bring some safety help, which I'm sure they're going to, and we saw them a couple weeks ago drop 8 back in coverage and kind of double Kelsey and Hill. That leaves some one-on-one for OBJ and some man coverage, 11 targets in man coverage in these playoffs, and he's got 10 of those 11 targets. So I really like OBJ in this game. Is there a Bengal? We'll get you out of here on this. Is there a Bengal that you're feeling here?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty obvious. I think everybody wants to bet on Jamar Chase, but I'm all over T. Higgins. I grabbed him at plus 165. I know a lot of people, when they hear my picks today, they're like, man, like that's a safe pick. The Super Bowl is the one game you want to take maybe a little bit more safer picks. Like,
sure.
Reason being is because even though I play the rule of you got to bet guys over plus 200, that's because I'm betting touchdown scorers routinely. I'm betting 15 to 20 touchdown scorer bets a week, let's say. Whereas most people, when they're betting touchdown scores, it's like here or there. And then in the Super Bowl, they decide to dabble 1 or 2. So you could break the rules and take a guy like Cooper Kupp today or Jamar Chase if you feel really confident in it. You just have to remember that you're capping your profits if you're going to take a guy like minus 160 or minus 110. Now, why I'm taking T. Higgins, and he's actually up to plus 175 now with FanDuel, just checking before the show. Last 2 playoff games, 199 yards receiving, 13 catches, 19 targets. He played over 90% of the snaps in all 3 playoff games. And the reason why I bring up these last 2 playoff games specifically is because the Bengals started slow in both of them. and they had to play a little bit of catch up, especially in the second half. And I think the Rams are going to win the game. So if I think the Rams are going to win the game, what I thought was, okay, let's look at how the Bengals perform offensively in the last 4 games that they've lost. In those games, Higgins had 106 yards receiving as an average. So right now his over-under receiving total is at 68.5. I'm way on the over on that one. And he caught 2 touchdowns in those games. So I think Ja'Marr Chase is going to draw a ton of attention from the Rams secondary. I don't know how much Jalen Ramsey is actually going to shadow him. I feel like that was almost posturing, when being asked, from an interview standpoint. Yeah. But if Jalen is the one who's going to be shadowing Ja'Marr Chase the entire game, that's huge for a T. Higgins bet. And I'm really hoping that that's what the Rams kind of employ from a defensive status, because obviously the Burrow-Chase connection, if they don't shut that down, the Rams are going to be in big trouble. So I think that as a result, the Rams will be ahead, the Bengals will be trailing, and then T. Higgins' show starts in the second half when we get a touchdown.
Yeah, I love that one as well. I think we'll see the Rams in their base defense, but if Chase starts going off, then exactly to your point, we will see Ramsey on Chase, and that just leaves some pretty decent coverage for T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins is going to be a big factor as well. It's easy for everyone to go with Chase and Kupp, right? Those are the 2 studs. They've been awesome. But all those secondary pieces are pretty good. And what we know,
I think if you like those guys, though, Meaney, I think what I would say is I don't generally endorse parlays, especially for touchdown scorers. But if you are going to do it, I would probably just do a same game parlay of Chase and Kupp, and you can get that around plus 200, plus 220.
Agree.
And just feel a little more safe about that than just betting them individually like that.
I totally agree. Absolutely. And if you did that, I believe we had this conversation, you and I, but if you did that a couple weeks ago, right, in the championship week, you had all the studs. They all hit. Kupp hit, Debo hit, Kelsey hit, Hill hit, they all. Cole Hardman. But all those studs playing in those 2 games scored touchdowns. So for you to do the same game parlay stuff to help yourself out a little bit, we appreciate you, dude. I know that you have some prop bets over at ftnbets.com for people to check out as well. Again, the special edition of Touchdown Town, big game edition, happening Sunday at 1 Eastern, and you will join me a little bit later on this afternoon on our FTN YouTube page, 2:30 Eastern as well. And we have a comment here. I can only imagine it's from somebody at FTN Network, because I see the handle that you're no longer allowed to wear any other outfits on air. So that's it.
Damn. Somebody got to up the FTN Bets wardrobe budget then, because this is straight out of my own closet. This is Calvin Klein suit. I need a little bit of Armani or something like that next time I'm on.
G-Dog 5000 on the Twitter machine. We got Frank Brank in here next. We're to talk some NBA. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus or Chris Meaney as we bring in Frank Brank. I like to call you Frank Bank. This is my first real conversation with you, dude. I appreciate you. The real Frank Brank on the Twitter machine, one of our newest additions over at FTN, and you've just been absolutely crushing it over at ftnbets.com with a lot of your picks. Thanks for taking the time here, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Nice to be on.
We'll get into some futures in a little bit. You and I kind of wanted to get together for the last few days and wanted to kind of pick your brain on like an NBA slate, but it's just so tough. We've been saying all week, especially this week, to kind of lock in some picks and some totals with the trade deadline happening yesterday. A lot of moving pieces and, a lot of injuries and just uncertainty in the association right now. So we'll save that for another day, but I encourage everybody to follow Frank on Twitter. If you're not already subscribed over at ftnbets.com, if you are, you get everybody's picks across every sport. So that's one of the cool perks. You'll get Frank's picks and my hockey picks and a lot of PGA picks, just absolutely everything. So Frank, before we get into some NBA futures, because I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well, what'd you make of the trade deadline yesterday? And of course, we have to lead here with James Harden. It finally happened. There's a lot of rumors over the past couple weeks. Harden shipped to Philadelphia, but man, they gave up a lot to acquire him. What'd you think of the move?
They did give up a lot, but I think we need to look at this trade almost as two different trades for each team, because Simmons wasn't playing for the Sixers, right? Like they didn't give up any production because he wasn't going to play and he hasn't played. And we don't know. I think we know at this point what Ben Simmons is, at least from a projection system standpoint. I think we know what to expect from him. But it's almost like on the net side of things, they traded James Harden for Seth Curry and then to make salary room for Ben Simmons, right? Like that's sort of what in my eyes sort of happened on the net side. And then on the Sixers side, from a rotational standpoint, they traded Seth Curry for James Harden. Like I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit and say like, I think the trade made sense for both teams, especially if Harden wanted to leave Philly or wanted to leave Brooklyn. I think that makes a lot of sense. You don't want players playing with that toxic roster already that don't want to be there, right? I think that's a bad idea, especially going into the Eastern Conference, home stretch here and in the playoffs where it's pretty jumbled together, right? This Eastern Conference is kind of confusing already. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have teams there. So I do think it works for both teams, but I did sort of listen to a lot of the trade deadline talk yesterday about this, and I've heard so many people say the Nets won the trade. And at the end of the day, and it sounds overly simplistic, but the best players tend to win in the NBA, right? Like, so I think the best player in this trade is James Harden, and the Sixers effectively flipped Seth Curry minutes for James Harden minutes. And I think that's a win overall for them. And I think the Nets still have a ton of question marks, right? Like, when's Durant coming back? Kyrie can't play in home games, at least for now. Like that's probably going to change, I think. But he can't play there for now. What are we going to get out of Ben Simmons? And the same people that told me that at the end of last year when Simmons was really struggling in the playoffs and on the home stretch there that he was worthless and they just need to dump him and they need to get rid of him are telling me that the Nets won the trade. So it's like, it's very confusing to me as like, the moving parts here. But I think the trade does work for both teams. But if I'm the Sixers and I'm Daryl Morey, I am ecstatic over flipping Seth Curry minutes for James Harden minutes. And I think Seth Curry's a productive basketball player, but he's not James Harden.
No, I agree with that too. You make some good points, right? I mean, essentially, they didn't have Simmons all year, so their team has improved. I'd liked Curry there, though. I like the shooter. Giving 2 first-round picks to another team that you're competing with down the future in your own conference. I thought that was a little strange too. But you do what you can to get a guy like James Harden. He is a game changer, despite really not. I don't know if it's fair to say not getting it done in the playoffs. He's had some phenomenal playoff games, of course, but
sure.
He's yet to really kind of take that next level in the playoffs. I just want to stick with that trade for a second. Like, how do you feel like Harden and Embiid will fit in? Because Embiid is having one of the better seasons we've ever seen from a big man. He needs to have the ball in his hands. Harden loves to have the ball in his hands as well. Like, how do you see that duo fitting in together? Do you think that will work?
The NBA is confusing, right? Like it remains to be seen until we see it. We saw LeBron James teams struggle for half the season and then win the championship, right? So it might take some time. It might not be till next year. It might be all click at once in the playoffs, or it might click right away. I don't think anyone can really predict that. I do think just subjectively, I think they'll be fine together. Like Embiid, out of necessity, has sort of stepped out and improved his 3-point shooting and his, long two shooting in general. I think Harden can drive and create looks for him. I think Embiid can create looks for Harden in the same way. I do agree with you. I think losing Seth Curry does come at a price a little bit. He's shooting over 40% from three this year. He's not some fringe NBAer anymore. And those were productive minutes. But at the end of the day, you don't really know until you try. And at least Morey's familiar with James Harden. I think they know how their games will work together. I don't know that James Harden, I would have to go back and look, but I don't think he's really ever had a big man like Embiid to sort of pair with. So, to make a comparison to past situations is kind of difficult. And then, we're talking about chemistry a little bit on the Nets side. I mean, coming into the season, we would have said that Kyrie and Ben Simmons are probably the most toxic players in the NBA, like the least, like the most selfish, right? Players that are coming into the season. However you want to grade Simmons' issues, I don't think anyone really knows other than him and the team what really went on there. But Kyrie and Simmons sort of in one roster, and I could make an argument Durant might be third in that discussion on sort of a little bit of toxicity. I think chemistry wise, I think it could work really well for the Nets, right? I think it could go fantastic. Don't pressure Simmons to shoot. Just tell him to get to the rack and improve his free throw shooting a little bit, and just defer to the other two guys when or if they're healthy or playing every game or however that's going to work down the stretch. But this team's also in the 8th seed, and they could end up with a very tough road in the playoffs if, they might even be in this play-in game, right? We don't really know where they're going to end up depending on how the injuries and how the mandates go in New York. So I think the Nets have more question marks, but I also don't think they could have kept Harden because it just didn't seem like he wanted to be there. So, yeah.
Right. It seemed pretty toxic. Yesterday, I just was in kicks with when they were doing the All-Star draft with LeBron and KD. I was just losing it at those two.
Yeah,
but on the desk, I mean, they were talking, I think it is a good trade for both teams. But when you have a guy in Harden that doesn't want to be there, I think you just, you move on. But it's crazy that those three only played 16 games together. We really didn't get a good look at that trio. And I agree with what a lot of your takes too with the Nets. I think that, Steve Nash is going to be a good coach for, figuring that system out. And you talk about Simmons. I mean, he's a terrific defender. He's not going to be asked to be the guy to take that big shot in Philadelphia where he was asked and he didn't take it anyways, but he's going to have KD to lean on and Kyrie as well. They get some board help in Drummond and they get a nice shooter, I think, in Seth Curry. So it'll be interesting.
I guess in the meantime, and not to hark on this too much because I know we got some more stuff to get to, but in the meantime though, the Nets are playing a home game. KD's out right now. Simmons is it. That's who's gonna be though. So in the meantime, they're the 8th seed, and I do think they're still probably better than the Hornets and the Hawks, and obviously the Wizards who kind of gave up already. But it's iffy on home games at least for the Nets for the time being.
Yeah, we'll get to the Nets in just one second. I want to ask you if there was any other trades that really kind of piqued your interest. But I think maybe when you talked about the big man, you said you go back and look. I feel like Harden, Dwight Howard, but it wasn't elite Dwight Howard, right?
Yeah,
he hasn't played with a big man like this. He definitely hasn't.
Not one that can shoot like Embiid.
No, not at all. Any other trades that piqued your interest?
Yeah, I really like Boston's move to get Derek White. I was kind of surprised. I think this is a classic Boston move when you look at Derek White. He's 6'4", but he's an excellent defender. We've talked. I heard a lot of people talking about his 3-point shooting kind of dropping off a little bit. He sat around 35% for the last 2 seasons. He's around 31% now. But he also was sort of asked to be the guy for the Spurs a little bit. They leaned on him a little bit more this season. And when you get that attention, I think that definitely hurts. He's not going to have that attention for Boston, right? They have so many good defenders. And I was just scrolling through the roster and they got Thesis back as well. He's not incredibly productive because he's so limited offensively. But when I look at the guys that are going to get minutes here, pretty much exclusively going to be Tatum, Brown, Smart, Robert Williams, Grant Williams, Al Horford, Thies, Derek White. Every single person on this roster is a plus defender in my model. Every single one is a plus defender. And now they added Derek White, and I saw a stat. He's still shooting 48% on corner threes this season, which is absurd. He's going to get a lot of them with the offense that those guys can create. And they don't have anyone that's a 7-footer, right? They don't have any Brooke Lopez style players on that roster. but they have guys that are all 6'4" and above. They're all great defenders. And if you look at their recent games, they've won 8 of 9. And they've held the vast majority of those teams to like 87, 75 points in some cases. Like they're playing elite defense.
Yeah.
And sometimes the projections don't always match the output. And I'll talk about a team like that in a little bit, but their projection system is very much as of late, like matching the output that we're getting on the defensive side of them. And now they added someone who's at least a really good 3-point shooter and another elite defender, in my opinion, especially on the perimeter. They can really stunt teams that don't have, an elite big man to sort of counter them.
Yeah, their defense was just off to start the season, but I guess maybe injuries were kind of going through their lineup as well. New coach, yeah. Now we're seeing, to your point, some elite defense. That was a surprising trade. Don't really have time to get into the Kristaps one. I thought that as a Mavs guy, I was like not surprised that Kristaps was gone, but I just didn't like the return was a little odd.
I'll give you one comment. I think it's more about Jalen Brunson entering free agency than it is about Kristaps.
Well, I would like for them to keep Brunson and like for him to be part of the future, but we'll see. Okay, we only got a couple minutes, but I did want to bring up the NBA futures with you. We got a board of the top 10. You mentioned the Nets. I haven't seen a team favored to win the NBA championship in the 8 seed. I know a lot has happened to them. They've lost 10 straight. They got a really tough schedule over their next few games as well, but they are favored according to DraftKings. We got the Suns who just continue to roll. You see CP3 on the board there. I mean, another game with 19 dimes yesterday. The Suns, I think, have won 18 of their last 20. The Warriors at full health in there at 425. And then you got the 76ers and the Bucks at 7-1. I still think the team to beat in the East, the Bucks, man. I still like their big three. Later down the list, I mean, you got the Jazz, the Lakers, who did nothing yesterday at 25-1. The Grizzlies, a bit of a surprise team led by Ja this season. And the Bulls playing pretty good basketball led by DeRozan and company as well. Who stands out to you here?
I honestly not much on this list. The Nets team really surprises me. I honestly think you might even have a little bit of value in the Suns, but the West is a little bit tough. They're going to play some dogs there. The Nets number is disgusting. Like it's so absurd. Like it's just not even remotely right, in my opinion. There's so many uncertainties, like we talked about. I don't like the Bulls here. I'm looking further down the board. I talked about Boston. I honestly think that they're one of the better teams, especially right now in the NBA. You look at the East, they're 5 games back of the Heat, who has overperformed, right? I don't think the Heat are going to continue to be this good down the stretch. And Boston, I don't think it would surprise me at all if they ended up in a 1 seed. I think they're better than the Bulls. I think they're better than the Heat. I think they're better than the Cavs. I still think the Bucks, like you said, I still think they're the best team in the East, personally. We kind of played this game for the last couple of years, but the cream tends to rise to the top for them. They were exposed last night to the Suns, who just abused them in the paint because no Brook Lopez, but he should be returning soon. So looking at this board, I'm looking down. I saw the Celtics floating around 50-1. I think there's some value there. It's probably half that at if you want to take them just to win the East, because I do think the Suns are something to deal with in the West. But I like the Celtics at 50-1. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they ended up in the 2 or 3 seed. They're only 5 games out of the 1st seed, and that is very convoluted in the East. So if they continue to play this well, I think you better get in now, because they're only going to get better, in my opinion, with the addition of Derek White and Thies coming back. On the Western Conference, I played Minnesota last week at 200-1. Now I'm coming in off of a game where they got embarrassed by a completely depleted Kings team that gave up. But when we look at the NBA playoffs, you tend to sort of convolute the stars at the top, right? Like there's like 5 guys that matter in the playoffs, and this is why we see like LeBron win despite the rest of the players being pretty bad, because he always has the ball, and he plays 45 minutes and all of this stuff. And I look at the Timberwolves, they're now down to like 150-1. They won like 4 or 5 or something before losing to the Kings. But when I look at this team of Beverly's very good on both ends, Towns good on both ends, Russell's a really good offensive player, Anthony Edwards good on both ends. They have Vanderbilt's a very good defender. They have 6 guys that can really play basketball on this team. They haven't put it all together. They all haven't been healthy like a lot of the teams in the NBA. But I look at this roster, I'm like, what's wrong here, right? Like, these guys are going to get 40-plus minutes in the playoffs, 6 guys that are really good basketball players. I think that they could maybe surprise some people. And if for some reason, I look at the Western Conference, I think they could pass the Nuggets. I think they could even catch your Mavs here a little bit, and they could end up with like the Grizzlies or something in the first round. And then you never know. Like the Suns are 1 injury or something away. Like if Ayton gets injured or something, they could be vulnerable, right? Like for 200, do I think they're going to win the Western Conference? No. But at 200-1 or 150-1 to win the championship, Probably close to 101 to win the West. I think there's some value there if you want to jump into that, So one team on the East, Celtics, I think has some value around 50, and I played the Timberwolves at 200, down to 150, but I would probably still play the 150 there.
Yeah, great value. We love that. We love long shots in this show, Frank. Absolutely. I'm seeing in our free prop shop, Boston Celtics on DK 60 to 1. PointsBet has them at 30, but to your point, most books have them at 50 and 27 to 1 to win the East. Frank, this has been fantastic, man. You're a stud. We love you at FTN. I'd love to do this again with you sometime. Really could kind of pick your brain and have longer segments, but we do have to get out of here. We appreciate it. Check out Real Frank Brank over on the Twitter machine, and his notes in the NBA Discord channel. They're just fantastic, and a lot of people are winning thanks to you, so we appreciate you, dude. All right, we're going to go back into the NFL. We got some NHL picks as well. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. We went a little long there with Frank, but it was fantastic, man. He's a super sharp mind. So I got some NFL props here for you for the Super Bowl weekend. Tino's going to jump on in the next segment. We'll talk about some novelty props and so have some fun there. But this is what I'm thinking. I know throwing a lot at you guys. Actually got a lot more in our FTN Bet Tracker with more analysis there. And of course, the Super Bowl show here this afternoon on our FTN YouTube page, we're going to dive into just about everything. But for me, I really like Odell Beckham Jr. in this game. I like the over 5.5 catches, like the over 60.5 receiving yards. If you've been following along on this show for the past couple weeks, I've taken him every single week, plus money 3.5 grabs, plus money 4.5 grabs. And I'm taking it again at plus money at 5.5 grabs here. I got it at plus 120. I think it's still plus 110. He's averaging 6.3 catches in 78 yards here in the postseason. And I gave some numbers with Jill, but if you're just tuning in here live, he's got an 83% catch percentage here in the playoffs. It's the highest by wide receiver over the last 10 postseasons, minimum of 20 targets. That from ESPN Stats and Info. 4.3 first downs in the playoffs as well. And I do expect the Bengals to double and get some safety help. And for man-on-man coverage, Odell Beckham Jr. has caught 10 of his 11 targets in those situations. Cooper Kupp over 105 yards. It just seems to happen every single week with this guy. Hitting the century mark seems to be pretty easy for him. Joe Burrow over 2.5 rushing attempts and over 35.5 passing attempts. He's got over 35.5 passing attempts in 8 of his last 15 games. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if you look back at the football game log, just when it comes to Burrow and games that they're trailing, he's chucking, and he's going to have to chuck. I don't think Cincinnati's going to have a lot of success running against the Rams defense. I just don't think so, and he's going to have to get the ball out quickly. So I think he's going to eclipse this passing attempt mark. Sony Michel, 4.5 rushing attempts. More on that a little bit later on. I know Jeff Ratcliffe really likes that one, but I do think he's going to be involved. He had 10 carries the last time out. I'm not buying Darrell Henderson being a factor here. Cam Akers is going to line up wide, maybe some empty base sets there. I do expect maybe a couple targets for him. 3.5 catches plus money is tempting, but I'm going to take the receiving yards. And of course, Evan McMoney over 1.5 field goals. I do think we'll see Cincy move the ball, and the red zone defense is pretty good for the Rams. So if they struggle inside the red zone, which they have throughout the playoffs, we could see a couple field goals there from McPherson. Okay, we'll break. We'll bring in Tino. He's got some props as well. Keep her locked. Dude, where's your shades? Come on. It's a tough act to follow, right? Tino Rodriguez _ on the Twitter machine checks in here. Just leave me about 2 minutes to talk NHL at the end of the show. You got some fun props. Let's get into those.
Well, so no shades, no suit. Definitely not Calvin Klein, but you know what? That's okay. I do have 3 good. I know, right? I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl show just to see what everyone's going to rock. Meaney, you got to step your game up now. Let's go to Novelty Props. We don't have very long. I told you my favorite out of these 3 here is probably going to be the first play of the game to be a pass at plus 115. This has happened for both teams in all 6 playoff games, 5 out of the 6 times. The Rams have done it twice. Was an opening play to OBJ on a short wide receiver screen. The other was in the Cardinals game. They threw to Cooper Kupp. Last game out, the Bengals ran the ball against the Chiefs. But similar to what you said, although that was the only time they did that, I think the Chiefs were vulnerable against the run, and they wanted to try to use that to their advantage and set the tone with that early. I don't see that happening against the Rams. I think it could be like the Tennessee game where Joe Burrow tried to open with a pass and got sacked immediately. So if you do think that might happen, it's actually not a bad bet to take a sack on the first play as well. But I just think if you look at the track record here, both these teams, especially the Rams, I think they're going to try to get the balls to the receivers early. And I think at plus money on something that's happened for these teams 5 out of the 6 times is good. Then I'm going to go to Cooper Kupp to score the first touchdown. This is probably my first touchdown bet of the game anyways. And when I was looking at and shopping this on DraftKings, I stumbled on this special prop. So I do like Chase to score. Now, if you just took these 2 separate outside of that, not for Chase to score the second touchdown of the game, it's about 10-1. So that's not a bad hedge if you wanted to go that route just in case Chase scores and it isn't the second touchdown. But at 35-1, I can capitalize on my Cooper Kupp first touchdown, similar to what you guys talked about before with you and Gilles. Like Kupp and Chase just seem like the surefire guys. It seems like everyone's on them. Obviously, there's not much money to make on them, just betting them straight up where the line is right now. I think Kupp's almost at minus 200 if he's not there right now. So I think this is a good way to play it, getting 35-1 here. It's not bad. And then I'm going to take the consecutive completions of either quarterback. It widens my options. I think there's going to be a ton of passes. We love Burrow's over attempts at 36.5. I think Stafford could still air the ball out a lot. I kind of like his yards in this game. But we just the 6.5 is a weird number. I can see this getting a little tricky because, again, we're talking about completions, not an attempt. But plus money on 2 quarterbacks that could air the ball out 35 plus times. I just need them to get hot. I need them to have 2 sustained drives to really get this, or 1 really good drive. And again, we talked about how often we think they're going to pass. I think these 3+ money plays are actually pretty good for novelty props. We're also going to take orange. I'm thinking of doing this like weird hedge thing. We're going to take the Gatorade orange, but I also kind of like blue. I'm taking the color of both teams. We'll come up a unit if either hits because it's 3-1 orange, 4-1 blue. Thinking if we go a unit on each, maybe, but then they'll go clear or no color, and it's going to be like water, and then we lose on both. So, I don't know. That's where my head's at on the Gatorade color right now.
There was so much more I wanted to talk about, but we just, of course, we've run out of time. We did get into some fun halftime stuff and the Gatorade over All in Football, which you can catch on our FTN YouTube page as well, and maybe the replay on Game Plus Network. I love all of those props that you gave, and I think Stafford's the guy that does it. His 70% completion rate, when he has at least 2.5 seconds in the pocket, he has the best completion percentage, the best QBR percentage, and the most yards per attempt. And I think that they're going to be able to protect him like they have all year long. Dude, appreciate it. Quickly, Rams win?
Rams win, Bengals cover. I'm on it. I'm not getting off of it. I've been on it with you.
I'm with you.
I took them the +4. We hedged it that way. We're looking for the middle. Let's get a plethora of riches here, Meaney. Let's just win it all. Let's just win it all, right?
NHL picks in here next. Don't go anywhere. Got some NHL picks here to round out the show. We'll start here with some shop props. Nikita Kucherov at 3.5. You can get that plus money over at Caesars. 2.5 juiced up across the board. He's actually cleared 2.5 in every game but 2 this season, but he has at least 4 shots in 8 straight games. We had 2.5 yesterday at -145. It was an absolute gift. I think he had like 8 shots or something like that. Jason Robertson in here, 2.5 shots. Evander Kane, 2.5 shots at -150 is another steal. He's had over 2.5 shots in every game. I know it's a tough matchup against the New York Islanders, a little bit of a tougher one, but like I said, he's cleared 2.5 in all 5 games with the Oilers, 11 shots in his last 2 games, a season high 6 shots and 21 minutes of action in his last game. So now he's starting to get into a bit of a groove and he's starting to play a little bit more. Evan Bouchard is the bonus there at +125 over at DraftKings. He's cleared in back-to-back games in 7 of his past 9. And with the coaching change, I think we'll see Evan Bouchard be a staple on that first power play unit, which is what we all want. I think all Oilers fans want that as well. And then, I went with Jason Robertson. I talked about it on the show the other day. I think you can go with any star here. They're all averaging over 2.5 shots per game on home ice, but I am going to go with Robertson. I think he's got the best price here. 2.9 shots over 21 home games. He's cleared in 9 of his past 13. And then quickly on the way out here, these are the picks that I am feeling for tonight. I like the Bolts. I know that, it's going to be Elliott between the pipes, but I'm still going to take him on the puck line here at -110. The Stars getting a little crazy there at -160, but I love them on home ice. They worked out for us well the other day against Nashville, and I'm not really feeling this Jet squad right now. Maybe you can put them in a parlay. And I understand people want to maybe just take the team with the coaching change. Maybe we see a little bit of boost in Edmonton with some of the players, but the truth is they just don't have the goaltending, and I really like the direction of this Islanders team. They spanked Vancouver the other day. I like that at +130. I think they can get the job done. A whole lot more over at ftnbets.com. Andy, I see the question. I will address it. I'll circle back here on the YouTube page. Thanks, guys, for taking the time to hang out. Have a great weekend and enjoy the Super Bowl. Cheers.